just beginning with Ilia Topuria. I believe that he's going to be forced to fight Arman Sarukian, even though the UFC doesn't want to give Sarukian that fight, right? Because he pulled out of the last one, he created a problem. You had to bring in Renato Moicano, who was already on the card, fortunately, at the last second. But it didn't look good for him. But now I said during that fight this past weekend, he needs a finish, and he got it uh, by submission in the second round, a dominant performance. So now he's in line to fight for the lightweight title. But it's conflicted because Ilia Topuria wants to move up to face Islam. I don't think the UFC is going to allow that right now. But they wouldn't rule that out for UFC White House, which is going to be in what, late June, I believe. So if you're going to have an Islam versus Topuria massive fight at UFC White House, you're going to have to get this fight in by January or February, which is going to be very, very tough. You need Arman Sarukian to face him, and you need Islam to face a guy probably in Ian Machado Gary. And that creates a tough situation because, looking back at the do list for a second, the welterweight division is heating up. You see number 6, Shavkat Rakhmonov. Well, he hasn't fought in a year, but we're not moving him down because we recognize that he's likely the future of the division, at least to really challenge Islam. Ian Machado Gary is there at number 8 with his impressive performance. He was already in the top 12, so he got moved up. But then at number 10, you got Michael Morales. So you got 4 guys in the welterweight division in the top 10. And then as you go through the list, you got another guy in Carlos Prates at number 18. Probably should be more near the top, but it's just confusing because you got Volkanovski, Sarukian, of course, Nunes and Harrison are right there. Valentina Shevchenko could be much higher than 16. So you got a lot of conflicts here, especially inside the top 20. And it's really going to take time to see how this all plays out. But if we are going to have Islam versus Topuria at UFC White House, those fights need to happen by February, right? And then it's tough because of Ramadan. And Hamza and Islam are not likely to fight during that time, which causes a major problem for the UFC because during Ramadan you're going to be hollowed out, right? You're going to have other people fighting. This is why you haven't seen many fights announced yet in January. How quickly can we get some of these guys to return? Then February and March, they're not going to fight because of Ramadan, right? So you're going to have other title fights at that time. You might see Shevchenko again. You might see Pereira fight during that time. You might see the heavyweight rematch between Gane and Aspinall during that time. So there's fights that they can get done during that time. But then, I mean, if you got to wait on Islam and Topuria and Hamza, do you really put them in there in April, knowing they're off the UFC White House? So this is where the conflict comes. It's not that these cards are going to be watered down, but you also have a situation where the UFC is signed with Paramount Plus, and there's really no pay-per-view events anymore. They're still going to have the big cards, but they might water these things down and sprinkle in some other high-profile fights higher up in the card and the main card than you would think. So you're always still going to have like one title fight in there more than likely. Maybe we get one card where it's just a fun fight that's not for a title, like a BMF or something like that. But they're going to preserve these guys for UFC White House. I mean, you absolutely have to, right? UFC White House is going to be one of the biggest events in modern UFC history, primarily because of everything that goes along with it. I mean, you have the World Cup here of soccer during that time in Mexico, America, and Canada. You got the 250th anniversary of America. So, there's a lot that's going to happen. And who do you bring in for those fights? I mean, what major Americans right now uh, are you going to be able to bring in to fight on that card, or do you don't not even worry about that? Celebrate American history, 250 years, with just some big, big, big fights if it's going to be at UFC White House. So I'm just outlining the situations that the UFC has before us, and this is why these guys are all announcing what their plans are. We would love to see Islam Makhachev fight again. before Ramadan and get that in, and then give himself 4 or 5 months to prepare to fight again at UFC White House should he win, which is no guarantee. I mean, Ian Machado Gary is very good, but as we've seen, Islam is just on a whole different level. And there's no love lost there, right? I mean, you see Ian Machado Gary in there congratulating Arman Sarukian after the fight, and then whatever happened with him and Hamza, we don't know. But Hamza shoved him and yelled out some explicatives, right? And and therefore, I mean, it's because they know that Ian is going to be fighting probably Islam, and that's their boy at the end of the day, right? Could be even Company and Sarukian and Hamza. They're all going to side with Islam Makhachev for obvious reasons. It's like a brotherhood, and Ian Gary can be in there at the party for a minute, but he's not going to be able to stay long. That's the bottom line because attention is going to start shifting to, wait a minute, who are you going to fight next? You're going to fight Islam? Yeah, you can't be in here. And there's some other things going on there, but at the end of the day, you can't let Ian Machado Gary just chilling at the after party for too long. And then of course Ian Gary yelling at Hamza saying, act like a champ, all these type of things. You're not acting like a champ, represent the UFC the right way. You're talking to the wrong one. These guys are animals. They fight for a living. Fortunately, they don't fight each other, right? Hamza is not fighting Islam anytime soon. Islam isn't fighting Arman Sarukian. There's this whole inner circle working there where these guys are not fighting each other, so they're comfortable hanging out with each other and not fighting each other. But there may come a day when they do. There may come a day where Islam goes up to middleweight for a third title against Hamza. But what I think happens is these guys all continue moving up together. It's not like they're avoiding each other, but they're all looking up to get another title. So that's where this thing stands at this point in time. So a lot to come in 2026. How these fights are going to play out or who's going to fight who, nobody knows. Because if you're Carlos Prates, you have a case. If you're Michael Morales, you have a case. Uh, we got 5 or 6 guys in the top 20 of the do list that are all in the welterweight division. So, in the past when we've done polls, the lightweight has always risen to the top, and it still will be near the top. But to me, right now, even if it's a short period of time, which might turn into a long period of time, the welterweight division is ridiculous. Because if you take away Islam, you got 5 or 6 guys that can win this thing right now. And who is likely to give them the biggest challenge? I would say first, Shavkat Rakhmonov. Second, Ilia Topuria. And then third, Ian Machado Gary. And I'm not even sure that Ian couldn't give him a run for his money. The problem is can you defend takedowns?